The sun was sinking low behind the ruined hills of the alien colony, painting the sky in shades of orange and gray. Dust drifted through the streets, carried by the dry wind, and the houses looked tired, walls cracked, doors half broken, roofs patched with whatever scraps the people could find. It was a place where hope had grown thin, where hunger and silence lived side by side. A human traveler walked through those streets, his boots heavy against the stone ground. His name was Ethan, a wanderer who had seen many worlds, some rich, some poor, some alive with music and others drowning in sorrow. This colony felt closer to sorrow. His eyes moved slowly from one corner to another, watching families struggle to carry water, watching children with hollow faces chase after crumbs, watching the broken spirit of a place that had almost given up. He had come here for trade, nothing more. His ship needed supplies, and he thought this settlement might have enough food and fuel to keep him going. But as he walked deeper, he realized there was nothing normal about the silence that filled the air. It was the kind of silence that comes after loss, the kind that makes people look away when a stranger passes by. Then he heard them. Small voices, sharp and desperate, breaking the quiet. "Human, please. Wait, please." He turned and saw them, 3 children, their skin pale under the dim sun, their eyes wide and wet. They rushed toward him, stumbling over each other, fear and hope written all over their faces. Their clothes were torn, patched again and again until nothing of the original fabric was left. Their hands were dirty, their cheeks streaked with dust, yet their eyes shone like the last lights of a dying star. The tallest of the 3, a boy barely old enough to be called young, grabbed Ethan's arm. His grip was trembling but strong with desperation. "Please marry our mom," the boy cried. His voice cracked, but he forced the words out again, louder, as if afraid the human would not understand. "Please marry our mom. She's all we have left." Ethan froze. The words struck him like a sudden storm, sharp and unexpected. He looked at them, unsure if he had heard right. Marry their mother? From children he had never met. The youngest girl, small and fragile, clung to his other arm. Tears streaked her face as she whispered, "She's all we have, human. She's the only family we have left. If you don't help us, they'll take her away. They'll take us too." Ethan's heart tightened. He had seen hunger. He had seen fear. But rarely had he seen such raw pleading in a child's eyes. His mind searched for words, but the children spoke again, their voices tangled with sobs and hope. "Our father is gone," the boy continued. "He fought in the last raid. He never came back. The others treat us like we're nothing now. They say our mom cannot take care of us. They say someone will claim her. Please, human, only you can save us." The middle child, a girl with quiet strength, raised her chin. Her voice was softer, steadier, but it carried the same desperate truth. "We need you, please. If you walk away, we will have no one." Ethan felt the weight of their words press against him. He had come for trade, for supplies, not for this. Yet here they stood, 3 children with nothing left but hope, clinging to a stranger because hope was all they could offer. He looked at them closely. Their faces carried the marks of suffering, but their eyes carried something else. A belief that humanity could save them, that a human heart was stronger than the cruelty of the world around them. He wondered what kind of life their mother must be living, hidden away, fighting each day to keep her children alive. The boy gripped his sleeve tighter. "If you say no, they'll come for her tonight. They'll sell her. They'll leave us alone. Please don't leave us alone." The wind pushed through the street, carrying with it the cold smell of dust and despair. Ethan looked down the road. Shadows were growing longer, and more eyes were turning toward him now, watching from behind cracked doors and broken windows. The whole colony seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if he would walk away or stop. For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. His chest rose and fell with slow breaths, his mind torn between reason and something deeper. Logic told him this was not his fight, not his world, not his burden. But the trembling hands of the children told another story, one that spoke louder than reason. The youngest girl pressed her forehead against his arm and whispered again, her voice almost breaking. "Please, human, Please save our mom. Please, save us. And in that moment, Ethan felt something shift inside him. He realized he was no longer a traveler passing through. He was standing at the edge of a choice that could change more than just his journey. It could change lives. The cry of the children echoed in his ears, stronger than the wind, stronger than the silence of the colony. It was a cry that would not leave him, no matter how far he tried to walk. The children led Ethan through narrow paths between broken houses, their small hands pulling at his sleeves, their steps quick and anxious. The colony seemed to grow darker as they moved, not only because night was falling, but because the weight of fear followed them. Windows closed when they passed, voices lowered, and it felt as though every corner held a secret. Ethan said nothing. His mind was heavy, filled with questions he could not ask the children. He could see their urgency, the way their shoulders tensed with every sound, the way they glanced behind as though someone might follow. It was not just hunger that haunted them, it was something deeper. They stopped in front of a small dwelling at the edge of the colony. The house looked older than the rest, its walls leaning, its door made from wood so thin that a strong wind could break it. The boy pushed it open, and the smell of smoke and worn cloth drifted out. Inside, a single figure sat near a dying fire. The light flickered across her face, showing a woman with pale skin marked by exhaustion, her eyes deep and quiet. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, strands tangled, as though she had long stopped caring for herself. Yet despite the weariness in her posture, there was something steady in the way she held herself, as if she refused to let despair break her completely. The children rushed to her side, clinging to her arms, burying their faces against her worn clothes. The woman looked up, her eyes settling on Ethan. For a long moment she said nothing, only studied him with a gaze that carried both suspicion and sorrow. The boy broke the silence. "Mom, we found him. A human. He will listen. He will help." The woman's lips pressed together, her breath sharp as she lowered her gaze. Her hands trembled as she pulled her children closer. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of endless nights spent in fear. "You should not have brought him here," she whispered. "Humans do not stay. Humans do not save people like us." Ethan felt the sting of her words. He had heard many alien voices speak with distrust, but hers was not born of anger. It was born of disappointment, as if she had once believed in kindness and had it taken from her. The little girl lifted her face, her cheeks still wet with tears. "But Mom, he is different. He listened to us." He stopped. The woman shook her head slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Stopping does not mean saving. People stop to look at the broken, then they keep walking. Ethan took a step forward. The firelight cast shadows across his face, and he met her gaze without flinching. "Your children asked me to come," he said, his voice steady. "They believe I can help. And I do not walk away from those who beg with such voices." Her lips parted, surprise flickering in her eyes, but she quickly hid it behind caution. "Do you know what they ask of you? Do you understand the weight of it?" The boy looked up at Ethan, his eyes burning with urgency. "If no one stands with her, they will take her, human. They will claim her as if she is nothing. Then we will be alone." Ethan turned back to the woman. She lowered her gaze, her hands gripping her children as if afraid they would be torn from her arms. "They are right," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Without protection, I am nothing here. My husband is gone, and in this colony, a woman, alone is prey. They will come for me, and my children will be left with no one. This is why they beg you. This is why they cry to a stranger." Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Ethan's heart pounded with the weight of her words. He saw now that it was not just a plea for marriage, not just a desperate child's wish. It was survival. It was the only way this family could endure the cruel laws of their colony. The woman finally raised her eyes again. Her voice was softer, now, but edged with steel. "If you accept what they ask, you will carry more than their hopes. You will carry their lives. And if you refuse, then leave now, before they believe in you more than they should. The fire cracked, sending a spray of sparks into the air. The children clung tighter, their eyes darting between their mother and the human, waiting for his answer. Ethan stood still, his jaw tight, his thoughts torn between reason and the pull of compassion. He had not come for this, yet destiny had led him to their door. In the dim light, the woman's shadow stretched across the floor, long and fragile, yet unbroken. She was a mother who had lost everything but still fought to stand, a figure both vulnerable and strong. Ethan felt the truth settle inside him. This was not a shadow to walk away from. The night outside deepened, and the colony waited in silence. But inside the small house, a choice was forming, one that could change everything. Morning came with a gray light spreading across the colony. The air carried the smell of smoke and dry earth, and the streets slowly filled with quiet movement. Traders opened their stalls, children hurried with empty jars to fetch water, and elders sat on broken steps watching with eyes that had seen too much. Yet beneath this routine, whispers moved like wind through the crowd, sharp and restless. A human had entered the widow's house. A human had sat with her children. A human had not walked away. The colony spoke in hushed voices, each mouth passing the story with growing weight. Some said the human was a fool, others said he was bold, and a few wondered if he had been chosen by fate. Whatever the truth, no one ignored it. The sight of him walking through the dusty paths stirred questions people had not asked in years. Ethan felt the eyes on him when he stepped outside. His shoulders carried the weight of every stare, every whisper that spread as he passed. He had faced battles, storms, and endless travel through space, but this kind of silence pressed harder. The people did not shout. They did not curse, but their stares cut as sharp as blades. At the marketplace, a group of men leaned together, their voices low but filled with mockery. "Did you hear?" one said. "The human sits in her home like he owns it already." Another spat on the ground. "She clings to outsiders now. Desperation makes even proud women bend." A third man laughed bitterly. "If he marries her, it will not be for love. It will be for pity, and pity is weaker than hunger. It will break before the season ends." Ethan heard them, though they thought he did not. His jaw tightened, but he kept walking. He had no words yet, only thoughts that ran heavy through his. Children playing nearby stopped their games to stare. Some pointed at him, whispering to each other, their voices filled with curiosity rather than scorn. To them, the idea of a human with an alien family was strange, almost like a story told at night. They laughed nervously, unsure if they should fear him or admire him. Not everyone was cruel. An old woman selling herbs leaned closer when Ethan passed. Her voice was cracked but steady. "If you choose this path, human, walk it with strength. These people will not make it easy, but those children deserve someone who stands tall." Ethan nodded slightly, her words cutting through the noise of scorn. Back in the small house, the widow sat by the fire with her children close. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm within. She knew the colony whispered. She knew how quickly words could turn into action. She had lived in the shadows long enough to understand the cost of being different. And now the human's presence had made her life a target of every tongue. Her eldest son watched her carefully. "They are talking about us, aren't they?" She touched his shoulder gently. "They always talk, my son. Words are their comfort. But we must be stronger than words." The boy hesitated before asking, "Do you think he will stay?" Her gaze turned toward the door, where faint sunlight crept in. She remembered the steady way the human had looked at her, the weight in his voice when he spoke of not walking away. Something in her heart wanted to believe, but fear pressed harder. She whispered almost to herself, "Hope is dangerous, but maybe we cannot live without it." That evening, as shadows stretched long over the colony, Ethan returned. The children rushed to him, their faces lighting up with relief that he had not left. Their laughter was small but real, and it filled the room with a warmth that had been missing for too long. The widow studied him carefully. "Do you know what they say? "Outside," she asked. "I hear them," Ethan replied. His voice was calm, though his eyes carried fire. "They whisper like the wind, but wind cannot decide my path." Her lips curved slightly, almost into a smile, though it faded quickly. "If you remain here, whispers will grow louder. They will test you, and they will test me." Ethan looked at her, then at the children clinging to his arms. "Let them test," he said. "Strength is not proven by silence. It is proven when you face the storm and do not fall." The words seemed to linger in the air, heavier than the firelight. The widow lowered her gaze, but her children looked at Ethan with wide eyes filled with something new. Faith. Outside, the colony's whispers carried on, twisting into rumors and judgments. Yet inside that small home, a fragile seed was beginning to grow, something stronger than fear, something that might survive even the harshest winds. And though Ethan did not say it aloud, he knew deep inside that his journey had changed. He was no longer a traveler passing through. He was standing in the middle of a story larger than himself, and the colony's whispers were only the beginning. Night had fallen over the colony, and the narrow streets lay quiet under the pale light of 2 moons. Fires burned dimly inside. Scattered homes, and from afar the sounds of tired voices drifted, faint and broken. But in the widow's small house, silence hung heavier than the air itself. Ethan sat across from the woman, her children pressed close to her sides. Their eyes moved from him to her and back again, as if waiting for a promise that could decide their lives. The crackle of the fire between them was the only sound for a long time, until the widow finally spoke. "You saw the way they looked at us," she said, her voice low. "You heard the whispers. If you agree to what my children ask, you will no longer be a stranger passing through. You will share our burden, and our burden is not light." Ethan met her gaze. "And if I refuse, what happens to you?" Her lips trembled, but she answered without hesitation. "Then we are lost. They will claim me, and my children will be scattered like dust. Some will work, some will starve, and none will survive whole. That is the weight we carry. That is why they cry to you." The children clutched her tighter, their eyes wide and fearful. Ethan felt the heaviness of their stares, as if each one carried a stone and laid it on his chest. He had walked through war zones, had stood in places where people begged for water or bread, but never before had he been asked for something so complete. The eldest boy leaned forward, his small hands curling into fists. "You are strong, human. They will not touch us if you stand with us. Please, we have no one else." Ethan's heart pounded. He could almost feel the colony outside, its voices pressing in through the thin walls, reminding him that this choice was not only between himself and this family. It was between himself and an entire people who doubted him. He rose and walked to the door, pushing it open. The cold air brushed his face, and he looked out over the dark colony. He could see figures moving in the distance, shadows against shadows, people who already judged him, who would fight him if he chose this path. His ship waited beyond those hills, quiet and ready to carry him away. He could leave tonight and never return. That would be the easier road. Yet when he turned back, he saw the children's faces lit by the fire. Their eyes carried something the cold night never could: trust. And he realized the easier road was also the road of abandonment, a path that would leave 3 innocent souls broken beyond repair. The widow rose too, her hands resting on the shoulders of her children. Her face was pale, her voice trembling, but her words were firm. "I do not ask you to stay out of pity. I do not ask you to save us out of pride. I only tell you the truth. If you choose us, you must fight for us. If you choose us, you must become more than a guest. Think carefully, human, because once you decide, you cannot walk away." The fire flickered between them, shadows stretching across the floor like dark threads tying their fates together. Ethan closed the door and faced her again. "You speak of burden. You speak of risk. But life itself is a risk, and burden shared becomes lighter. I cannot promise wealth. I cannot promise peace. But I can promise I will not abandon you." The children gasped softly, hope rushing into their faces. The eldest boy's eyes shone as if a heavy chain had been lifted. The widow's lips parted, but her voice broke before the words formed. She lowered her gaze, tears falling silently onto the firelit floor. For the first time in many seasons, she allowed herself to feel the fragile weight of hope. But outside, the whispers of the colony grew sharper. Men spoke of the human with anger. Women warned of scandal. Elders shook their heads at a union they called unnatural. And somewhere in the dark, plans were already forming to test whether the human would break or stand. Ethan felt it, the storm that was coming. The weight of his choice had settled fully on his shoulders, heavier than steel yet unshakable. He had chosen not only the children, not only their mother, but also the fight against a colony that wished them broken. And as the flames burned low, he understood that this was no longer their story alone. It was his story too. The next morning, the colony was no longer whispering, it was speaking aloud. News of the human's decision had spread through every alley and market corner. Faces turned when Ethan walked by, not with curiosity this time, but with open judgment. Some eyes carried anger, some disgust, and only a few carried quiet sympathy. The colony was not ready to accept what had begun inside the widow's home. Men gathered near the well, their voices sharp as they spoke openly. "This is madness," one said. "A human tying himself to one of ours is an insult." Another spat into the dust. "He thinks he can walk in and claim respect, but he knows nothing of our ways." A third voice added with bitterness, "If we allow this, what is next? Will humans rule our families too?" Ethan heard their words as he passed. He did not answer them, but his silence only made them bolder. Children stared at him with wide eyes, pulling at their mother's hands, asking questions too young to understand. Women shook their heads and whispered warnings, fearing trouble would soon follow. Back inside the small house, the widow watched her children eat their thin meal of bread and roots. Their smiles were brighter now, yet her own face remained tense. She could feel the storm building outside. She could feel the judgment of her people pressing against their walls. She had lived among them her whole life, and she knew how cruel their rejection could be. The eldest boy looked at her with determination. "They will not hurt us if he stands with us," he said. His voice carried strength, but she saw the fear hiding beneath it. Ethan placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "They will try to test me, but I will not bend. What matters is that you and your sisters stand behind me. Together, we will show them that family cannot be broken by their words." Later, that day, Ethan joined the widow as she walked to the market. It was the first time in many seasons that she had walked with her head high, her children clinging close at her side. Yet the market fell silent as they entered. Traders paused in their bargaining, hands stilled over scales and baskets, and all eyes turned to them. An elder, tall and thin with a face carved by years of scorn, stepped forward. His voice rang out so all could hear. "Human, do you believe you can take her as your own? Do you believe your presence makes her strong? You are an outsider, and outsiders cannot carry our burdens." Ethan met his gaze without flinching. "Strength is not born from blood or soil, it is born from will. Your colony calls her weak because she stands alone. But she is not weak. She is stronger than any of you who hide behind judgment. And if my presence gives her a shield, then I will carry it." Gasps rippled through the market. Some looked away, unwilling to challenge the elder, but others murmured their agreement in secret. The elder's eyes narrowed and his voice turned colder. "You will not last here. Pity is not enough to survive our trials. We will see if your words mean more than air." The widow's hand trembled at her side, but Ethan reached for it, steadying her. His voice remained calm. "Then let your trials come, I will meet them." That night, men gathered outside their home. Their voices carried into the dark, threatening, mocking, daring Ethan to step outside. The children huddled close to their mother, fear shaking their small bodies. Ethan stood by the door, his hand on the frame, his eyes burning with resolve. He did not answer their taunts, but his silence this time was not weakness. It was a promise. When morning came, the men were gone, but the message was clear. The colony would not give them peace. Every day would be a test, every word a blade, every glance a weight. Yet Ethan did not falter. He walked through the streets with the widow and her children, his presence a shield they had never known before. Slowly, not all but a few began to shift. A woman selling fruit offered an extra piece to the children. A young man nodded at Ethan in quiet respect. A neighbor who once turned away now watched with cautious curiosity. The colony was not ready to accept them fully, but seeds of change had begun to stir. Inside the small house, as the children fell asleep by the fire, the widow looked at Ethan with eyes that carried both fear and gratitude. "You do not know how much risk you have taken," she whispered. Ethan answered softly, "Perhaps not, but I know this. No risk is greater than abandoning those who need me." And in that moment, she realized he was not standing with them out of pity. He was standing with them because he believed in something greater, a family bound not by blood but by choice. The days that followed were not easy. Every morning the colony watched Ethan with cold eyes, waiting for him to fail. Some laughed quietly behind his back, saying he would run when life became hard. Others whispered that the widow had bewitched him, that no human would choose such a life without a hidden reason. Yet despite the weight of suspicion, Ethan did not bend. He rose early, helping the widow fetch water from the well, carrying heavy jars as though they weighed nothing. He repaired the cracks in her home with stones and clay, his hands blistered, but steady. When the children needed firewood, he walked into the hills and returned with enough to last through many nights. These small acts did not silence the colony, but they silenced doubt inside the home. The children looked at him with growing pride, and the widow found her voice steadier when she spoke to others. One afternoon, while working near the fields, Ethan noticed a group of young men blocking the path. Their arms were crossed, their faces sharp with challenge. The tallest stepped forward, his tone mocking. "You think swinging an axe and carrying jars makes you one of us? You are only pretending human. When true danger comes, you will flee." Ethan met his stare without fear. "Danger has followed me across many worlds. I do not flee. If it comes here, I will face it the same way I face you now, with strength, not fear." The men sneered, but something in his steady voice made them hesitate. They left with curses, but the people who had been watching from a distance whispered among themselves. For the first time, some began to wonder if the human's promise was more than words. That evening, the widow spoke quietly as they sat by the fire. Her eyes were soft but heavy with caution. "They will not stop testing you. They will push until they see if you break. Why endure this for us?" Ethan looked at her, then at the children who were drifting into sleep beside the fire. His voice was firm. "Because no one should beg for their family to survive. Your children's voices are still in my ears, and I will not let those cries be in vain. I gave them my word, and my word is not something I abandon." Her lips trembled with unspoken emotion, and she lowered her gaze. For years she had fought alone, carrying burdens heavier than her strength. Yet here was someone who carried them as if they were his own. The true test came 2 nights later. A pack of raiders swept into the colony under the cover of darkness, their shouts breaking the quiet, their torches setting shadows dancing across the streets. The colony panicked, running for shelter, clutching their children in fear. The raiders stormed through the market, tearing food from stalls, dragging families into the open. Ethan was the first to step into their path. Armed with nothing more than a staff he had cut from the hills, he faced them head-on. His voice rang through the chaos. "You will not touch them. Not tonight." The raiders laughed at first, calling him a fool, but their laughter turned when his staff struck. He moved with a strength they had not expected, each blow measured, each strike driving them back. His arms bled from cuts, his breath grew heavy, but he did not fall. The colony watched from their doors, stunned by the sight of a human fighting for lives that were not his own. When the raiders finally fled into the night, leaving curses behind, the people turned their eyes to Ethan. He stood in the center of the street, blood streaked across his arms, his chest heaving, yet his back unbroken. The widow rushed to him, her children clinging to his sides, their tears of fear turning into tears of relief. For the first time, no one whispered against him. The silence that followed was not filled with doubt, but with awe. That night, as the EII family sat together, the widow spoke words she had long kept hidden. "You have shown them what even I did not believe, that a human would bleed for us, for me, for my children. Why?" Ethan's answer was simple, his voice steady, though his body ached. "Because promises are more than words. A promise is a shield. And I promised your children I would not leave them." The firelight glowed against their faces, and for the first time she allowed herself to smile without fear. The children curled close to him, their eyes filled with a peace they had never known. The colony still carried doubts, still carried judgment, but now they also carried the image of a man who had stood alone against raiders and had not broken. Ethan's promise was no longer only to the children, it was to all who had watched. And whether they liked it or not, the colony now knew his presence was not weakness. It was strength, a strength born of humanity's unshakable will. The morning after the raid, the colony was different. The sun rose over broken stalls and scattered ashes, yet the air carried more than fear. People gathered in small groups, speaking in low voices, glancing toward the widow's house where the human rested with bandaged arms. Their words no longer carried mockery, they carried something heavier, respect, though many struggled to admit it. Children ran through the streets, repeating the story of how the human had stood against raiders, with only a staff. Elders shook their heads not because they disapproved, but because they could not deny the truth of what they had seen. Even those who hated him were silent, for no one could deny that Ethan had fought when others had hidden. Inside the small house, the widow sat by Ethan's side, her hands carefully wrapping new cloth around his wounds. Her eyes moved slowly, studying the scars across his arms. She had lived years in fear, years in silence, but now she saw in him something that had been missing from her life: safety. "You should rest," she said softly. "Your body needs time to heal." Ethan shook his head. "My body will heal. What matters is that no one was taken last night." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "You gave more than your strength. You gave us hope. That is something I thought was gone forever." The children leaned close, their small hands resting on Ethan's arm as if to keep him from ever leaving. The eldest boy's voice was steady with pride. "You are our shield, now. No one can take her away, not while you stand with us." Days turned into weeks, and slowly the colony began to change. Where once doors closed when Ethan passed, now some opened. Neighbors offered bread, water, or a kind word, small signs of respect that grew with time. When he walked with the widow through the market, people no longer whispered only judgment. Some nodded, some smiled, and though mistrust still lingered, it no longer drowned every step. Ethan worked beside them in the fields, his hands in the soil, his sweat mixing with theirs. He helped mend broken walls, carried sick elders to shelter, and taught children games from distant worlds. His actions spoke louder than any defense, and each day, the colony's walls of prejudice cracked a little more. One evening, the elder who had once mocked him approached with slow steps. His face was stern, but his voice carried a different tone. "I judged you too quickly, human. I thought you would run when burden grew heavy, but you have stayed. You have given more than many of our own would. For that, I offer my respect." Ethan nodded but did not boast. His promise had never been for respect. It had been for a family who once begged him in the dust. That night, as the moons rose, the widow stood outside her home watching the stars. Ethan joined her, his arm still marked with scars, his presence steady. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and something deeper. "You were a stranger when you walked into our lives," she said softly. "But you chose us, when no one else would. You gave my children a father when they had none, and you gave me strength when I had lost mine." "I do not know how to thank you." Ethan looked at her, his voice calm and sure. "You do not need to thank me. Family is not only born, it is made. And we made it together. The children ran out, their laughter filling the air. They circled, around the two of them, their joy brighter than the firelight inside. The eldest boy shouted proudly, "We are not alone anymore." In that moment, the colony watched from afar, and though not all would say it aloud, many felt the truth. They had witnessed a family remade, not through tradition or blood, but through courage and choice. The widow reached for Ethan's hand, her fingers trembling only for a moment before holding firm. For the first time in many years, her heart was not heavy with fear, but lifted with hope. And as the night deepened, the family stood together outside their small home. Shadows cast long beneath the twin moons. They were no longer broken, no longer alone. What began as a desperate cry had become a bond unshakable, a bond that even the colony could not deny. The human had kept his promise, and in doing so, he had given them more than safety. He had given them a future.